Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Home Tech Podcast. Jason Griffin here. So happy to have you with us. I am joined, as always, by my partner, Seth Johnson. Seth, how's it going?
Good, man. Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. My phone hasn't caught on fire yet.
It's always a good thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that.
Poor Samsung. Oh, my God.
Big story.
I'm not a big fan of Samsung, but they do make really cool products. Like, the phone looked like a really nice phone, except for the fact that it kind of catches on fire.
Spontaneously combusts. Yeah, that's kind of a problem.
Yeah, when you're designing things, it's actually something you don't want to put as a bullet point.
You would typically try to avoid that. Yeah,
exactly.
Man, that's a big story. I'm hearing it everywhere on some of the other podcasts I listen to. It was on the radio coming home. Samsung's in a bit of a bind here. I'm sure it's going to put a hurting on them. I thought these kits that the users have to send their phones back in are just it's crazy. I mean, it makes sense, but gosh, just the lengths that Samsung is having to go to. It's like these 3-tier boxes with like a fireproof bag in them, and they all have to be ground shipped because they can't go on planes. And gosh, just what a mess.
Yeah, I was talking with my neighbor, and she's elderly, and I was actually helping her bring her trash in because she just had some surgery done or something like that, and I had my phone out, and she's like, "I hope that's not a Samsung."
It's a big story when your elderly neighbor is reminding you about it.
Exactly. Oh, I thought that was great. Oh man, what a bad
funny
deal. I wonder how many years it's going to take for them to recover. Like, it's one thing to they're going to have this recall, and it's on one phone of the bajillion that they make. How many years is it going to take for them to come back and rebrand and release a phone? I'm sure the next one will be fine, but they're gonna have to do that. And then how much are they going to have to pay to make people walk around with these things and endorse them?
Yeah, yep. Man, they got a tough battle ahead. I definitely feel for some. I'm sure there are a lot of good people at Samsung that are being affected by this. So hopefully it'll all shake itself out sooner than later. Like you said, I think they make great hardware. I've always been an Apple guy myself, so just been in the iPhone world. Never really gave their phone serious consideration, but yeah, definitely unfortunate. Let's move on to a brighter note. We've got another great show here. We had Brad Hintze on from Control4, and regular listeners to our show are definitely going to be familiar with that name. Brad is a great guest. We've had him on to talk about some various news from Control4 over the couple of years we've been doing the show. Tonight we had him on to talk about Bakpak, which is technically a Pack Edge product, but obviously Pack Edge and Control4 are essentially one and the same now. And so I really enjoyed our conversation with Brad. I think they're doing some interesting things with Bakpak, and it just ties perfectly into the big conversation we've been having quite a bit here with RSM and the recurring monthly revenue is a huge conversation in our industry. So I really learned a thing or two, and hope our listeners will as well.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good conversation to have with him. We got a new patron this week.
We did, yeah. I want to send a big thank you to Bruno Napoli. And Bruno, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Bruno came on at the $5 level, so we want to definitely give him his due and thank him here on the air. Bruno is, if you're not familiar, that might be a name that rings a bell to some of you. He's the founder of Krika, which happens to be another RSM remote site supervision tool. And I know Bruno's a listener to the show and a fan, and so we really appreciate him coming on and supporting the show. If you're interested yourself in learning about becoming a patron and supporting our efforts here at HomeTech, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support, and that's where you can learn more about our Patreon page, which is a way that you can support our show for as little as $1 a month. Help buy Seth some cups of coffee to get through those late night audio editing sessions.
Yep, absolutely. And one thing you get to do is go into our Slack channel. We have that open for our patrons. And Bruno's been in there, and he's been a great addition to have. He's really kept it lively for the short couple of days that he's been there. It's been fun to have him. Absolutely.
So again, stay tuned. Make sure you stay with us for our interview with Brad Hintze. But before we do that, as usual, we're going to jump into a few of the kind of technology headlines that we saw this week and just talk about those for a little bit. So we're going to start on a lighter note here. Seth had a story that was actually, you mentioned our Slack channel. So TJ over in our Slack channel was kind enough to point this out to me. And an Englishman I presume has set a world record for the longest time that it ever took to boil some water for a cup of tea. Data specialist Mark Rittman, I'm not sure exactly who that is, but spent 11 hours working on a connected tea kettle to try to boil a pot of water. And he was putting some tweets out about it. It kind of went viral on Twitter. Had a lot of people talking about really the value of these connected devices and is it all worth it?
Yeah, well, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, coming from like the home technology background, right? I've spent 11 hours trying to do trivial tasks that, with an analog component would have taken 5 minutes. But that's kind of the nature of the beast, right? Like everything kind of has to work, and it has to work correctly, and it has to work in line with other different devices. I think he was trying to do something funny, like he was trying to do an Amazon Echo integration that wasn't really like it was a custom thing. But that's
right.
That's what you get into when you do custom work.
Yeah,
you get
and integrators know that well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're always trying to color within the lines. But yeah, in fairness, he was trying to do some custom Echo integration with a connected tea kettle that wasn't necessarily built out of the box to do that. And so this was all tongue in cheek and meant to be a little bit funny.
Yeah.
And some of the tweets will include a link to HomeTech.fm/132. Go check that out. It was a spirited dialogue, and I thought pretty funny. But at the end of the day, hats off to him. He got it working. It was a custom integration, like we said. And but I do think it begs the question because a lot of people will run into issues with a connected device here and there, and maybe they're not trying to do something custom. And it definitely touched a nerve with people in the Twitter sphere about, hey, why don't you just buy a normal tea kettle? Like,
Luddites.
What was wrong with
all of them?
Yeah, right, exactly. So
yeah.
Anyways, kind of funny. Definitely worth going and check out. Thought those tweets were pretty funny.
Yeah, I've seen this is kind of a trend, right? Like this is one of those things is to kind of like throw some shade towards new Internet of Thing devices, and really like you and I have kind of been watching this for a while. Like we've been looking at the industry and saying, oh, look at this month. There's a guy who came out with a light bulb that has a speaker in it. That's really cool. Who knows if it would catch on, but somebody has to do that, right? Like you're never going to know if you don't make the light bulb with the speaker in it, if it's going to be a product that people are going to buy. And what if
you know what this reminds me of, Seth?
What's that?
Did you ever get your internet connected crock pot?
I did not.
Oh man.
It didn't come in quite the right color combination, I guess. So
well, I know how that goes.
Oddly enough, I have 6 crock pots now. I don't know how that happened.
and not one of them is connected.
Not one of them is connected. No. But I mean, it's kind of a trend to kind of like poke at these things and make fun of them and say that they don't work as well as their analog component, like a light switch, a smart light switch. Of course, a smart light switch with a computer inside of it that's smarter than a dumb light switch is going to have a problem. We haven't gotten to the point where we're making computers flawless as like a contact closure for a switch. I mean, that's either on or off. It's a physical device that closes a circuit and turns on your light. But the stuff that you gain, like you're not going to get a dumb tea kettle and set it on your kitchen countertop and then say, hey, Alexa, or hey, Siri, make me some tea, and have it happen. It's never going to be something that you could do with a dumb tea kettle. But with the smart tea kettle, at least you have that option. Whether it works or it's a pain right now to set things up, that's one thing. But I'm
definitely.
I'm optimistic. Like you and I have seen things improve like exponentially over the past, 5? Well, we've been doing this for 10, 15 years. We've seen things go from stupid, horrible, universal type remotes up to like complete control systems. And now you have these beautiful Neo remotes and things that have come out. You've seen horrible distributed audio systems. I'm not going to mention their names. Go all the way into, Sonos and Amazon Echo. I mean, and Google Home. I mean, this stuff is getting better every day, and it's not perfect. But I think the advantages you get from the smart devices definitely outweigh the small amount of frustration you may have for 11 hours one day.
I agree. Yeah, and it's a weekend project, right? Now he can walk downstairs and turn on the tea kettle with his voice. So I'm sure he'll get some enjoyment out of that.
Who's
and I
laughing
agree.
now?
I think it's exactly. He emerged victorious, and I'm sure that was a good feeling when it finally worked. There's actually a video of it. Again, we'll include in our show notes. But let's move on here. Another story, Panasonic came out with a wireless switch. Seth, I'm going to love this story because it's tactile control. But it's actually interesting. They unveiled it at a show called C-Tech, which is out in Japan. It looks like an IoT show I wasn't familiar with. Interesting part about this story, though, is that the Switch actually doesn't require any batteries. It uses a small generator inside it that essentially converts motion into energy. And so it's a battery-free wireless device. Thought it was kind of funny. The article mentioned that one of the demos they were showing is that you could actually put this thing in a chair and then sit on it to activate it. So you can literally activate a home automation scene by sitting on your
I'm gonna have to bleep that, but this is a family show, Jason. Yeah, this is a really cool product. I mean, we kind of talk about these. What are they? The Amazon Dash system, right? The little like button, a Wi-Fi button you press that has a little lithium-ion battery inside of it, but it has a battery and it only lasts 2-3 years. But if Amazon were to use this particular product and this Panasonic button they've made, they wouldn't have to have any batteries. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I think there's a value add there. I do question, how much really is changing a battery every 2 or 3 years, or presumably, gosh, it's coming back to me, Seth. Didn't we? Maybe I'm confusing myself, but I thought we talked about those dash buttons, and wasn't there something that like the batteries weren't even going to be replaceable? And
they're
people
not.
Were getting
they're not. No.
People were like getting upset about that because Amazon's basically just saying, yeah, when it's done, just throw it away, which,
right.
Whatever. Drop in the bucket, really, when we talk about the environment. But in any event, yeah, totally. I see the value in not having batteries. I see people cringe from that a lot. We sell a ton of Lutron, and we are huge fans of all their product lines, but the triathlon line, the battery-powered stuff in particular, very popular. Yeah, shades, triathlon shades, very, very popular in retrofit environments. Here in Denver and up in Boulder, we've got a number of areas where there are historic districts, and sometimes we'll work in these homes where you're pretty limited in terms of what you can do as far as opening walls up and running wire. And so to have a battery-powered option is great, but the second you say battery, a lot of people will recoil, and you have to kind of explain, hey, the technology's come a long ways, and you don't have to change them, but maybe once every 3 years or something, and typically that'll alleviate people's concerns. But even at that point, you do have people that just can't be bothered with worrying about batteries, which I totally get. So this is kind of an interesting technology, and I'll be curious to see if it propagates into other companies and products.
Yeah, it uses kinetic motion, converts it to energy. I mean, I think it's a brilliant little device and a brilliant little product that they've put together. I hope to see it, integrated further down the road. That'd be kind of nice.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, I can't remember the specifics, but I feel like I've seen stories over the years that we've been doing the show of at least concept designs of like wearable technologies that can take body heat and convert it to energy. Right. So that's pretty interesting as well. So just that whole conversation about energy and not having to worry about batteries anymore, big deal. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we've got a nice little story. We bashed a little bit on Internet of Things devices. Let's bash a little bit on Comcast. They were fined $2.3 million by the FCC for what's called negative option billing. It sounds like there were allegations that the company had been billing customers for products and services they never even ordered, and it's actually a practice known as cramming. So you order a package from Comcast, and they put all this junk inside of there that you never even ordered, like HBO and all that stuff. I can tell you from personal experience with Comcast, this is exactly the reason that we ended up cutting the cable, because they put all this junk inside of their bill. We could never make heads or tails of it. And finally, we said, just forget it. We want the $79 internet package. That's it. No thanks.
Yeah. They have gotten that down. And when I say they, I mean cable companies in general, have gotten, I think, that down to a science of making their bills so impossible to understand. And then when you call to try and ask a question, you're just going to get somebody who, in my experience, can never provide you the clarity that you want. And so you just get to a point where you either roll over and accept it, or you get fed up and cancel and cut the cord. And I think we're going to start to see more and more people doing that with, the amount of options that are now becoming available. Over the top content, obviously a huge deal. I don't know. I think a lot of this just is bad business practice. Obviously, in general, there's a lot of negative sentiment towards Comcast and cable companies, which I totally get. I think a lot of what these companies screw up just has to do with the scale that they're trying to operate at, and providing a high level of service at that scale. I think it is impossible. I can't think of one really large company that size that I've ever dealt with that I had a good experience.
I would think Apple has done a pretty good job with their customer support. I mean, they've always been given really high marks for it, but they're not exactly
That's true. I just don't think of them as like a service provider, I guess.
Okay.
A little bit different. But no, it's a good point. It's a fair point. I just think and to your point, Apple has succeeded at that and creating goodwill for their brand, and that's an exceptionally difficult thing to do. And one of the reasons why Apple is one of the most successful companies ever. And so I think that is a very fair point.
Well, $2.3 billion or $2.3 million, not even billion, but 2.3 million is a drop in the bucket for all the money that Comcast has made by screwing over their customers for the past couple of years.
It is. Yeah, that's like a
insulting.
Nothing fine for them. Yeah, I totally agree. In addition to the $2.3 million fine, they are facing a 5-year, what's being called a compliance plan, which basically says Comcast must adopt, I'm quoting here, to processes and procedures designed to obtain affirmative, informed consent from customers prior to charging them for any new services or equipment, to which I say, yeah, that's common sense.
Right. Yeah. Well, there you go. Comcast.
Like, you mean Comcast actually has to tell me what they're charging me for? But only for the next 5 years, and then they're free to just go do what they want.
Hey, I mean, to me, on the balance sheet, this is probably a pretty good deal for them. They get to rip people off, and then for 5 years, they just kind of have to take 2.3 million on the chin, and I'm sure they will probably figure out other ways to make their bill even more confusing. I honestly, I just don't get it. I don't understand why it can't just be like spelled out, plain as day, this, and this, and not have these crazy prorated charges that just pop up. That's what happened to us. Like we had a nice little budget for a cable bill, and then all of a sudden the next month it's double. And we called in and said, "What's going on?" "Oh, and you were on a promo price plan." Well, I only have one cable card, and there's no way my bill should be this big. So goodbye.
Yeah.
And now,
good for you.
Yeah. We use them for internet. That's what it is.
I've spent a lot of time when I moved recently. When we bought the house, I had to spend a bunch of time combing through bills because it looked to me, and it did prove to be the case, that somehow I had gotten double billed for service at the old place and the new one. And gosh, the amount of time that it took me to get that sorted out with CenturyLink it was absurd. And busy guy working, trying to do a podcast, got a young family. I mean, this is the kind of stuff where you have to be really persistent, and a lot of people just don't have the time for it. And I think these cable companies will bank on that eventually you're just going to roll over and say, you know what, forget it. I'll pay my bill because it's just less of a headache than trying to fight for that $70 or $100 or whatever it comes to.
Yep, absolutely. Well, now that you've saved all that money by checking your bills twice, I know a place that you can spend all that extra money coming up here in a couple of days.
Yeah, big auction going on here in Denver. And man, this is a crazy story. And so listeners to our show will be familiar most likely with the company Haus, Haus, Home Automation University. This was a new venture started by a company here in Denver that has experience in the home technology space. Company called Essentials. It kind of branched out and did it. There was a bunch of coverage about this in CE Pro and a couple other industry magazines. This was again Home Automation University. The idea was they were going to become sort of a central training facility for the home technology space and bring people in who wanted to learn how to run a successful home technology business. Very ambitious venture. They built a 25,000 square foot campus here in Denver. I have not had the opportunity to see it in person. Sounds now like I never will, because they are officially closing their doors.
Well, you'll get a couple of days opportunity to go check it out if you want to bid on any of the equipment they have, including the 52 TVs that were hanging around the 25,000 square. 52 God. TVs, all Just Add Power, run by Just Add Power, which is HD over IP. This wasn't an inexpensive venture at all. We'll put a link in the show notes to the auction. You can take a look at the facilities. Holy cow. They went all out on this thing.
They were swinging for the fences. Seth, they got a salad bar for sale with some sneeze guards.
There's two of them.
Two of them.
Yeah.
One for you and one for me. I really could use one of those.
Well, I'll throw $5 towards it. You may have to store it at your house a little bit. I don't get up to Denver very often, but just put it in your basement there next to the recording.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. It's tough. I don't want to make too much light of it. It's a big story. This was as you pointed out, a huge venture. A lot of resources invested into this. I'm sure there are some very good people involved with this venture that are not left in a good spot, because this really did not last long. I'd have to go back and look at the dates in the timeline, but this was pretty recent and something that we've definitely been hearing about as far as when they opened and all of that here in the local market. It's a venture here in Denver, like I said, and so. I was very surprised that this happened as quickly as it did. I have to go back in the archives and look to when we first talked about it, and I'm pretty sure I'm on the air saying that I didn't quite buy it. I think the initiative was good, the intent was good in terms of I do think our industry needs a better educated workforce, and there are a lot of different ways that you can come at that. But I just didn't quite see how this model was going to work. And I did think that it would probably hang around longer than it did, though. And so that was the interesting thing to me, that this really just, for whatever reason, and who knows, don't want to speculate, but it just didn't pan out like anybody expected, even me.
Yeah, this was just kind of going back to the original announcement on this is December of last year. So it didn't last very long, not even a year.
Well, that was the announcement, but like I said, I'd have to go back and dig it up. But I know that they didn't open right around that announcement. It took them a little while, I believe. I'd have to go back and fact check myself on that. But I know that there were stories coming out about it, and it was being covered in CE Pro, et cetera. Before they were at that time, they were still building out the facility, to my understanding. And
gotcha.
I think some of it also had to do. I don't know how much it had to do with the delaying of the opening in general, but I do know that they were working very closely with Savant on the new remote, and there were, as people know, some delays on the shipping of that, and I don't know if that had anything to do with delaying the opening, but I do know that that was a big part of it was kind of a partnership with Savant to do some training for them, and so I'm sure Savant is bummed out that this didn't work as well.
Right. And this to kind of go back and talk about a little bit what they were trying to do. You mentioned it was a training, but it was a little bit more than that. They were kind of, from what I gathered, I did have a chance to talk to a couple of these guys at CEDIA, and they were very, I think they were very qualified for the jobs they were trying to do. But they were trying to basically standardize our industry, both in practices, like what you would do on a day-to-day basis, but also like how you would run your business, like use this particular software, you use this particular billing software, that kind of thing. And I know that like if you were starting up a home technology business, this might be a pretty good investment to do, like just to kind of get a head start. But I think your skepticism and wariness of it was well founded. Like it's not something that I think a well-established business is going to run out and try and do. And then again, they're charging about $1,000. Oh no, they didn't even say. I thought they were going to say they're charging a yearly fee on top of all that. to be part of this membership program for House. Like it was kind of a strange setup altogether. And I'm kind of sad that they didn't really, make it off the ground, because I think we do need something like that for the industry. We do need some standards set in place where we can barely define ourselves with a name, right? This has kind of been our joke. Don't call me a
technologist.
Technologist, yeah.
Yep.
we can barely do that, and like the ambition of these guys to go out and say, "Oh yeah, you can call yourself this, and this is how your business is going to run, and this and this." I imagine they got some sideways looks from a number of people who probably have successful businesses,
right,
but need that extra. May not even know what they're missing. Like I think I was talking with you, and I'm not even sure if I talked with you on the show about this, but I was at my hair cuttery place, and
yep,
talking. We talked about this. Like I was talking to the girl who cuts my hair, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we were here on Saturday. We had a leadership meeting and a team building thing, and we have to work on Saturday. And I was just in New York. I had to go up there." Like these people train. They are constantly learning how to further their get ready for this word, career. We don't have that in this industry. It is very transient. This is the best word I can describe for it. And like to see the contrast between somebody who is in essentially the same service as we are. I mean, they're serving people. They're service-oriented business. They charge for their time and their money and their experience. Hey, it sounds pretty familiar to me. Even like a high-end salon has the same high-end customers that we have. In fact, one of my customers was coming in while I was walking out the other day, which is hilarious. But so we have the same customers, but we run our businesses and treat employees and training completely different. And I thought it was kind of eye-opening to sit back and think about that and say, hey, why aren't we doing something like this? Why don't we have a standard way of doing business across the industry? It's kind of frustrating at some point. And then, somebody can be pretty successful without having any of this and say, well, I'm successful, so I don't need any of that information. I don't need to further my business any more than I already have. And
right,
to some point, they're probably correct as well.
Yeah, I think we've got an industry. The home technology industry is very full of entrepreneurial people who have built their businesses their own way, and I felt like that was probably the fatal flaw in my mind of House, was that focusing on trying to tell people, here's the high level accounting and here's how you run your resource management and all this sort of thing. I just don't think is going to resonate generally with people in our industry. Like you said, maybe people who are just coming into the industry and just getting started. But I didn't get the impression that was necessarily the only audience that they were targeting. And I don't know if even that audience would even be enough to support the business model. But I agree. I think that I think there's a place in our industry for some more standardized training, maybe more vendor specific. I know Cedia does a lot of this, and they would probably take issue with us saying that, hey, where's all the training and where's the leadership training? Because there is stuff out there, but
that's for their members, right?
Yeah, right. And also I just feel
their
like
members make up a very small portion of the industry, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, which is true. And I also think that it's a lot of it is it's just different. Like it's not I think vendor specific is the key, right? Like House was trying to work with Savant to say, hey, we're going to kind of be your training partner, and if you want Savant training, you come to us. And I think there's a concept there that could be hashed out in certain ways that could potentially work, that I don't think Cedia could necessarily do, just because they have to stay a little more neutral than that.
Right. Oh, that makes sense.
So, all right, Seth. Well, let's jump into our interview here. We've covered our news stories. Once again, we had Brad Hintze on from Control4. We talked mostly about Bakpak, which is the remote systems management tool, the RSM tool from PackEdge, which is, of course, owned by Control4. So really enjoyed our conversation with Brad, and let's get started. Hey, Brad, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, you guys. I'm doing really well.
Great.
I finally recovered from Cedia.
Yeah, I hear you there. That's been a recurring theme on our shows since Cedia, and so we're happy to have you on. Know you guys had a lot going on there, and we're going to touch on that quickly and spend the majority of our time here talking about Bakpak. I think that's a really interesting story and clearly one of the big things you guys were showing out at CEDIA. I know, Brad, you're becoming kind of a home tech veteran. We've had you on the show a couple of times, but just in case we've got some listeners who aren't familiar with you and what you do, why don't you give us just a quick personal introduction here?
Yeah, so I do all the product marketing for Control4. I've been here for about 2 years. It's been a lot of fun. I introduced the EA controllers, international square wireless lighting, several different OS versions, package, and everything that we did at CEDIA as well.
Awesome. Well, speaking of CEDIA, before we dive into Bakpak here, why don't you give our listeners just a quick recap, kind of the high-level bullet points, in case they missed any of our CEDIA wrap-up episodes about just some of the core things that Control4 was showing out in Dallas this year.
Okay, yeah. So big, a lot of news items. I think we packed in a little too much, maybe. I don't know. Never mind. That never happens, right? But our biggest release, and the one that we're really excited about, is Amazon Alexa adding voice control to any Control4 home. We've had really great adoption rates as well. About 10% of the homes that have upgraded to 2.9 have also added Amazon Alexa. And on average, they're talking to Alexa to control their Control4 home, 3 to 4 times a day, and 40 connected lighting and thermostat and scenes in each of those homes. So really excited and really pleased with that. It's a very natural way to speak to your home. We did a smart home skill, so you can just say simple things like, Alexa, turn on my home, or Alexa, turn on good morning, making it really simple. So we love that. That was a really great news piece. The next thing that we gave to Control4 homeowners and to dealers as well is the latest version of our operating system, OS 2.9. That included a new experience for shades and blinds, integrations with all the popular manufacturers, QMotion and Lutron and Somfy. So that was exciting. And then several other enhancements with 2.9. Another announcement that we're really excited about is that we support now nearly 10,000 devices that can be connected into a Control4 home. And we think that's a pretty big milestone and a pretty good position. That gives dealers, that gives consumers, that gives everyone a lot more choice with what they bring in and orchestrate inside of their home. So that's a good bump.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. We had a chance to catch up on the show floor and talk about a couple of things, but one of the things I missed when I was speaking with you was the Bakpak announcement, and this is a product that comes from the Pack Edge side of Control4. From my memory. Okay, well, tell us a little bit more about what Bakpak does, and then I guess what you guys announced at the show revolving around Bakpak.
Yeah, sure. So I know it's hard to believe that we missed that one in our conversation, but Bakpak was a big discussion point for a lot of dealers at CEDIA at our launch event. I was up on stage talking about it. It's new for almost all of our Control4 dealers. It was available previously to package dealers, but at CEDIA we made it available to Control4 dealers. And Bakpak is the tool for dealers to be able to manage all of their customers' connected homes. So the entire network in a single view, but then we've also expanded it so it brings in more of that home automation. So this is a tool or an interface to help make dealers more efficient and more effective, and when a dealer can be effective that way and deliver a really solid network, that helps their customers really remain happy. And we do this by giving dealers alerts and the ability to monitor proactively a customer's network. And if there's an issue, on their mobile device or on a laptop, they can jump in and try and resolve that issue without actually needing to go out to the customer site, in most cases. And then, of course, we also make it easier for them to get a customer's network up and running online and configured in a way that they get these intelligent alerts. there's a lot there, and sometimes it can be a little tricky to talk about Bakpak in that way, but it was really designed and built to make management of a connected home much easier for dealers. But we did, PackEdge has released Bakpak, and it's been out on the market for a while. But one of the things that we saw is that this kind of tool is really the most useful when a dealer can use it in every home. And when you or a dealer have the ability to log in and see all of your customers in one place, that makes you more efficient, and that makes that tool far more valuable. And you don't need to, for this customer set, I use this, and this customer set, I use that. And we saw that the licensing is and can be a hindrance for dealers, because then, on a project by project basis, almost, you have to decide, this project I can absorb the cost or I can charge the customer, but this project I can't. They're super budget conscious. So one of the other things that we announced with Bakpak, in addition to making it available to all dealers that buy PackEdge products, we've also announced that it's now available license and subscription free, because we wanted, and we think we're excited about it because we just wanted to remove all of the friction for a dealer to be able to just adopt this tool. And, we philosophically, we don't believe in monetizing our dealer base, right? We want to add value for a customer's home, and that we're happy to charge for. But we don't want to charge our dealer base, because we saw that dealers were having a hard time passing the cost of Bakpak along to their customers. And I think this is true of any management tool. And whether it's $29 a month or $2.99 a month, even those little charges, they add up, and that increases the friction for a dealer. So we're happy to kind of remove that for a dealer.
Right. That I can tell you from being a long-time Control4 dealer, Control4 programmer. One of the nice things that we tried to do, and in most cases, was use the Control4 diagnostics that were inside the system to try and figure out remotely what was going on at the client's home, and to now have that ability to do kind of the same thing, but on, I guess, more broad scale, because you're not just monitoring the Control4 gear. You're not just monitoring processors and touchscreens and Zigbee lighting. You're monitoring the network that's out there. So how, say I'm interested in PackEdge as a consumer, and I call my dealer up, what kind of hardware do I need to have to get started using this Bakpak service, or at least having my dealer use the Bakpak service?
So for today, what we're doing is, the NK1 wireless controller has the processor capabilities and the headroom to be able to monitor all of those devices connected locally. So the NK1 wireless controller, it optimizes the wireless network within a home, and it brings Bakpak in to the home. And that's the way that you bring it in today. And, really a lot of homes could get value out of the NK1 wireless controller. 2 or 3 WAPs, that's the point when you want to start thinking about it. So that's how it would show up in terms of a box inside of a home.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's, there's some macro topics there that you kind of touched on in terms of the pricing structure and stuff like that. And I definitely want to come back to that, but want to zoom in a little bit and talk specifically about the platform, nuts and bolts, so to speak, and what it looks like. And so let's start with just the initial setup and configuration process. If I'm a dealer and I'm curious about Bakpak, can you just walk us through briefly what that initial setup looks like?
Yeah, no problem. So it's really straightforward. So we just spoke about the NK1 wireless controller. There's some software on that device. It's called a Patroller. And what that does is that connects to the Bakpak cloud infrastructure. But since it resides on the network, it also connects to everything locally. So the first step for a dealer is you log into Bakpak and you register or connect that Patroller with your Bakpak account. And that's the first starting point. That creates the connection between the home and the cloud infrastructure. And then the next step is you actually scan the network, and the NK1 will look for other connected devices on the network and bring them all into a single interface. So then your router, your switches, your WAPs, your controllers, your Control4 controllers, and PDUs, all of those will show up inside a Bakpak, bringing it all into a single view. And then from there, you can click in and optimize each of the devices, set your SSID on the WAPs, make any port configurations or changes on the router. But the beauty is that you're doing it all inside of Bakpak, and you don't need to, because setting up a network previously, it was 4 or 5 different browser tabs open, different IPs, and you're writing notes on what the IP address is for this device or that device. Bakpak removes all of that and pulls that into a single interface, so it's much easier for you to kind of get everything set up and optimized. And in addition to just pulling it all together, Bakpak will also make it easy for you to kind of segment and identify those devices that are most important for you to monitor. If a WAP goes offline, you want an alert right away. But if a laptop or a mobile phone comes online and offline, you definitely don't want an alert for that, because those devices are designed to do that. So the next step inside of getting a customer set up inside of Bakpak is putting those devices into categories with different monitoring frequencies. And by default, Bakpak will pick up those devices that, for most networks are the high priority ones, WAPs, switches, routers, et cetera. And then the others you can put into either a lower monitoring frequency or a non-monitoring frequency as well. Bakpak's designed to kind of help you get up and running more quickly with all of these intelligent alerts, so that you don't need to spend 45 minutes clicking around, just so that you make sure you get those right kinds of alerts. And once you're done with that, then Bakpak will actually present you with a network map view. So you can kind of see, at the top, you've got your router, and then your switch, and then your WAPs, how it's sort of a network topology and a graphical view of how all of those things come together. Now you can see a table view as well, with like a MAC address and the IP and serial number when all of that information is available. So you can quickly see all the other connected devices. But the best part about Bakpak, when you're looking at it from a single user home, is that it pulls all of those devices in together into a single view. So you're thinking at it from a systems view rather than all of these individual disparate network components or home automation components.
Right. I think that's important, and it definitely all sounds good. I'm wondering how, if we zoom out a little bit, so to speak, and you've walked us through a single site and configuring that, and what sort of view and information and monitoring frequency and that sort of thing on an individual site level. Clearly, dealers who are listening to this are going to have multiple projects out there, multiple deployments. Can you talk about that aspect of Bakpak and how it works in terms of presumably there's a unified dashboard that'll show you a variety of different projects, and how it works with multiple users as well?
Yeah. So like we said, Bakpak is the management tool for your entire customer base. And, there's 2 ways to look at that. You can look at it from a long list view of all of your customers and their homes, and then the system within each of those. But you can also see it on a map view. And this gives you kind of that heads up dashboard of the status of all of the networks that, of your customers. So you can get a green pin or a yellow pin or a red pin. And at a glance, you know right away, yeah, everybody in my customer base, they're all happy. Everything's running well. Oh, maybe one customer is red or yellow. Maybe a WAP is offline or a firmware update or something like that. But that is pretty powerful to be able to see everything all in one view. But more importantly is what is a capability that we call virtualization. And this comes from the enterprise IT world. So it's a little bit nerdy, but the thing that is really powerful, and every time we talk about it with a dealer, they really get excited, is the ability to group devices rather than homes. And think of it this way: if you have, in 75% of your customers' homes, they're using the package RK1 router. And so you've got 30 homes that have this router. Well, when a new firmware comes out and you want to apply that with Bakpak, you can push that to all of those devices at the same time. It's just 1 or 2 clicks and they all get updated right away. Where previously you had to log in to each and every home and apply that new firmware. So you get a lot of that really exciting efficiency from virtualization, and that can cut across routers and switches and WAPs and even PDUs as well.
That's very cool. Considering the news that's kind of been sweeping the nation and the world about the security level of IoT devices these days, that's a very welcome feature. I think we're soon going to come at a point in time where it's legislated that that type of feature, if you're selling an Internet of Things device, or it's basically a little computer, like I think you're going to see that they're going to end up having to have a way to do that firmware update remotely without these security concerns, because that's pretty major if they can start hacking into them and using them for nefarious things. It could be a pretty big problem.
Yeah, for sure. And when you think about it, the vulnerabilities exist oftentimes just because of, a derogative way to say it is laziness.
Right.
And it's not really laziness. It's just like, okay, so what, it's good hygiene to continue to update my firmware, but I also have to run a business, right? And so people have to make those trade-offs. And the easier you can make it, the more likely you're going to do that kind of hygiene that does protect both you and your customer. Yeah.
Right. I'm curious to, if all this stuff does end up hitting the legislature, like I wonder if dealers will, have to write in some kind of accountability, like we're not accountable, the firmware has to be updated. Like this definitely makes that tool a lot easier, but I'm just kind of going down a little rabbit hole here that we'll get back out of it. But this type of product would totally bypass that conversation. You can go ahead and just update your entire customer base with 1 or 2 clicks and just take care of it. So that's really cool. Is it just a web interface, or is there like an iOS Android app as well?
It's both. So you get the web interface and the iOS Android app. And with this release, we released an all new version for the iOS and for Android. And that's an important distinction between mobile and laptop. Because we know that dealers are really busy. They're out on another job site, or they're enjoying their own life. And the ability to access it and do many functions on the mobile devices is really important, particularly when you get an alert, you want to jump in and try and fix it right away.
Right. I mean, it can save, it can make you look a lot better if you know these things are going on. And sometimes network things are very intermittent and not seen immediately. Like you wouldn't notice if your internet connection was going up and down every 15 minutes. It might cause a problem one day when you're trying to watch a movie, but you would notice day to day that was going on, especially if you're working and you're not at the house most of the time of the day. But if a dealer can see that that's going on, or someone is monitoring and saying, hey, this is going on, that really does help out. Let's talk a little bit about this, the VLAN setup that PackEdge calls zones. I'm pretty curious about that. I've always heard of it, but I've never been able to really wrap my head around it. Is it just like an easy VLAN, or is it something special PackEdge has done here?
It's really, this is a super nerdy way to describe it, but it's really kind of an abstraction layer on a traditional VLAN. So it is a real VLAN in the back end, but PackEdge has simplified the setup of a VLAN by making the definition consistent between multiple devices, because multiple network components. When in a traditional VLAN sense, you have to go in and define the IP ranges and configure that across everything. And if you miss one IP range or one number, it can throw the whole thing off. But when you have a consistent definition, so every WAP, every router, every switch, they all have package zone 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now you start assigning your devices to the zone, then you don't need to worry about IP ranges and all that. That's all taken care of for you. So it makes it much easier for a dealer to approach implementing and using VLANs to really optimize some of those larger networks and things that have a lot going on inside of the home.
Oh, that's really great. I mean, I've been in the situation where you have a couple of different brands of routers and maybe Cisco switches, and then you run into some Luxel gear, and it seems like everybody kind of does the same thing, but they all call it something different. And that's really nice if you guys have kind of just, or Package is just kind of unified the vocabulary, if you will, and made it easy to set up, because those tools can be really powerful and really help out on some of the large jobs. Can you see across the VLANs like inside of Bakpak?
Yes, you can. Yep. And you have the ability to see across those VLANs, and then of course make any changes that you need to as well. And that will get better over time too, and that's the benefit of having a cloud platform like Bakpak. We can kind of continue to roll some of those updates and changes as well.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, Seth alluded to something there that I want to follow up on a little bit. He mentioned, sometimes projects where you've got, let's say, network hardware from different manufacturers, or there may be dealers out there listening who are very interested in Bakpak and some of the stuff that you guys are doing with that platform that may or may not be Control4 dealers. So I'm sure this is a question you guys get all the time, but it's definitely an important topic in this emerging category of remote systems management. And how does Bakpak fit in to ecosystems, hardware ecosystems that are outside of exclusively Package and Control4? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So if you add the NK1, you can add that to a network and begin getting some of those benefits from Bakpak and the ability to manage those. For the most part, the way that really kind of shows up is the ability it pulls all of the devices in together into a single view, but then you simply launch the UI, the web GUI, for each of those devices. So it does save you having 5 and 6 and 7 browser tabs open and keeping track of all of the different IPs. But you don't have that deep integration with, for instance, Bakpak and Package devices. You have port control right at that Bakpak layer. So if you have an SX24 PoE switch, you can power cycle a port, or you can power cycle a Package PDU right within that UI. With third-party products, you have to launch their UI, but Bakpak does simplify launching those as well. We do have integrations with some third-party products, particularly in the PDU space. And over time you may see an expansion of that as well, but we haven't really announced anything there.
Okay, cool. Third parties, but what about first parties? How well does the Bakpak system from Package integrate with Control4?
So that was one of the really exciting things we announced at CEDIA, is a more tight integration with Control4. So it will recognize immediately your Control4 controller, which model number it is. But more importantly, then it will connect to the controller and see what devices are connected inside of that home, whether they be Zigbee, Z-Wave, or IP devices. So now you can expand your systems management beyond just the networking components and go out into your home automation. And the first off, and like I said, this is our first deposit in this space. And really, this gives you a great troubleshooting tool. If a customer calls you and says, hey, I can't get this light switch to work, or, my remote's not working, you can log in and see, and well, hey, it's not connected. It's offline. Maybe try rebooting or replace the batteries or something like that. So it gives you more information from that troubleshooting sense. And it does expand into this connected home management, regardless of what that connected device is really for.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So just to summarize, really, if you're looking at Bakpak, you can think of it as a standalone solution that you could potentially deploy just on its own, exclusive of Control4, But really, obviously, you guys see a ton of value in getting that full integration and having it be part of a Control4 ecosystem to really extract the fullest, greatest amount of potential out of it. Would you say that's an accurate description?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is an accurate description. I mean, yeah, like you said, we want to make Package a really useful network and Bakpak a really useful network management tool for those that aren't selling Control4. But because we have engineers that are working on both the network layer and home automation layer, we wanted a vehicle to deliver additional value between those two systems, and that's starting to emerge here.
Got it. And one other just quick point of clarification. So there's no licensing on Bakpak, and that's applicable to anybody selling the solution? In other words, if I'm selling Bakpak as a standalone network monitoring solution and not part of a Control4 system, I'm still getting that access to that service for free, correct?
Yeah. Yep. That's absolutely right.
Gotcha. Okay. Want to touch on something that we've sort of glossed over a little bit, but I think is a pretty big deal and something I want to make sure we put some emphasis on, and that is the ability of Bakpak to look into Zigbee networks and now Z-Wave. That was a new announcement coming into CEDIA that you guys were going to have Z-Wave integration, which we've talked about on the show. I think that's a pretty big deal. So just talk about the importance, as you see it, of the ability for Bakpak to monitor devices that live outside of a traditional network or IP scheme.
Yeah. When you look at kind of delivering a smart home or home automation, it really it's beyond just IP, and it does include Zigbee and Z-Wave. And this new integration, when you click on, in the Bakpak UI, you click on an EA3 controller, an EA5 controller, and you can see the Zigbee nodes, the Z-Wave nodes, and the IP nodes that are connected and controlled via that controller. And then when you do that, you can see quickly whether those devices are online or offline. Now, like I said, this is our first deposit, and in some ways you could call it an early access, because you can see that there are very clear ways where you could expand this and do some really, really cool things. This first step is still really valuable online, offline. You can see whether those devices are connected. So we're really excited about this and giving those dealers a comprehensive tool. And you mentioned earlier that you use the Control4 diagnostic tools and then your network tools, but we want to make it so dealers can be super efficient and effective, and you don't need to bounce between 16 different tools just to get your job done. And Bakpak is helping us to accomplish that kind of a vision.
Right. Makes sense. Well, we're running a little bit tight on our time here. To start to move this to a conclusion, I want to look back out to the big picture and ask a question that's a hot topic in the industry right now. And really, when we're talking about Bakpak, we're talking about an RSM, or remote systems management tool. But really, a bigger conversation is, are integrators and home technology professionals successfully rolling these kind of tools into recurring monthly revenue models? And that's a very important topic of conversation. I know you guys are trying to encourage people to come on board and get active in this by removing that friction of licensing. What is Control4 and PackEdge stance on RMR? Are you taking any sort of active role in encouraging your dealers to roll this service into an RMR plan, or are you just sort of staying neutral in that particular conversation?
We're neutral from a perspective of we're not adding to the cost structure for a dealer to do RMR. We want to enable, for some dealers, it absolutely makes sense. And for those dealers, do it. I think it's really great. We have several dealers that I've met with, and they've built strong businesses with a recurring service model. But we also have a lot of dealers that are doing a large amount of business, particularly where they're doing a lot of projects that are on the smaller end, it doesn't really make sense to do a big RMR model. And from a business perspective, we want to enable all of those dealers. And that's part of the reason that we removed the licensing. For the dealers that have it already, great, use Bakpak. For those that don't and don't have a plan, or they're dabbling and they haven't yet built a big business, great, go use Bakpak. It's not going to make you go faster than you need to. I think that there's a lot of energy and focus on RMR now. I think it really remains to be seen what it's going to do in the long term for our industry. I think that some people have the view that it might save their business or might save the industry. And I don't know that I would go that far with it. But, we wanted to provide the tools and the choice for dealers to build their business to be as successful as possible, whether that does include RMR or it doesn't.
Very good. Very good. Well, Brad, like Jason said, we're kind of running tight on our time here, but if somebody wanted to find out more about Control4 or in Bakpak, or connect with you directly, where would you send them?
Of course, Control4.com, package.com, PAKEDGE.com.
Yeah.
I'm on Twitter at bradhintze.com, just at Brad Hintze, keep it simple. So yeah, those are, or LinkedIn as well. You can find me there.
Excellent. Well, Brad, thanks very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. It was great talking to you.
All right. Thanks, Brad.
We'll see you.